Hello, everyone. This is Jeff at DivineCosmos.net, and this is a reading of my article entitled Parallel Realities and the Multidimensional Universe. There are vast, unseen, and unrecognized realms of existence in the universe. We are seeing only a small slice of everything that exists, just the very tip of the iceberg. The energetic field that we're immersed in is a field of existence that contains multitudes of realities. And of course, conventional science doesn't have a clue. Conventional science's understanding of reality is very one-dimensional. It essentially assumes that reality consists of only that which we can see and can touch. And it implicitly assumes that it is a singular reality, that the reality that we perceive and participate in is the one and only reality. They've ruled out, or maybe more accurately, haven't conceived of the possibility of unseen realms or other or parallel realities. Yet many ancient spiritual and metaphysical philosophies had a much more multidimensional view of existence. They believed that there were multiple realms of existence within the universe. They believed that the universe was somehow divided into what they called planes, each comprising its own reality, populated and inhabited by multitudes of entities, of beings, of creatures, of objects. The various ancient schools of thought each counted and organized these planes of reality a bit differently, but they all saw the planes as a progression from lower to higher, the lower planes being denser, more solid, more material, and the higher planes being less dense, less solid, less material, and more subtle or energetic or ethereal, the so-called spirit realms. Of course, modern science scoffs at these concepts and brands them as mystical and unscientific. But if they would take off their materialistic blinders and spend a little open-minded time working on it, they'd be amazed at what they would discover. They would discover the multi-dimensional universe. And the full ramifications of this discovery would likely change everything and change it for the better. Unfortunately, mainstream science is horribly stuck in its very rigid, materialistic, one-dimensional view of the universe. But there's hope because there's a small but growing cadre of open-minded, non-conventional scientists who have been tenaciously exploring the bleeding edge of the nature of reality. If you're interested in a good account of some of this new science that's been unfolding behind the scenes over the past 20 years or so, I highly recommend the book, The Field, The Quest for the Secret Force of the Universe. Unlike modern science, the ancients knew intuitively that the universe had many invisible parallel realities, but they lacked the scientific method to explain how this was possible. This is no longer the case, and there is nothing at all mystical about it. It's just physics. It's the physics of energy, vibration, and frequency. As the famous turn-of-the-century scientist Nikola Tesla said, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. To understand the science behind multiple planes of reality, we will need to review some basics first. We only see a very narrow band of energy frequencies that we call light. We perceive objects made of stuff we call matter because light is either emitted or reflected from it. Matter itself is actually just energy too, very tight and fast cyclical or oscillatory motions. Hence there is a frequency associated with matter as well. Everything is simply patterns of energy, and these patterns are composed of cyclical, oscillatory, vibratory motions, and hence they all have a frequency. Conventional science understands this to a certain extent, but the deeper and wider implications have not been recognized. And one of these implications is the multidimensional nature of reality. The range of frequencies that we, quote, see is a minute fraction of the entire frequency range. Even though science has extended our sight with instrumentation that can see frequencies of energy above and below our visual range, they haven't realized that there's a whole lot more going on in the other frequency ranges than they ever imagined. Complete parallel realities. They simply haven't even conceived of the possibility of that. The thought that there might be objects and entities existing in other frequency ranges, conceptually similar to those that populate our reality, but invisible and transparent to us, hasn't even crossed their minds. This narrow-mindedness is being shattered by a recent discovery of invisible intelligent entities by inventors of a new imaging device. This discovery should catapult us towards the full scientific understanding of the multidimensional universe if it's embraced and explored thoroughly. If you're interested in learning more about the specifics of this discovery, search YouTube for Thunder Energies Discovers Invisible Entities. So even though science has known that everything is energy for some time now, the full ramifications of this have not sunk in yet. What they have failed to appreciate fully is that all the things we see, all the objects, all the matter, are simply patterns of energy, and that all these things are sitting in and connected by a sea of energy that permeates all of space, the energetic field. The salient properties of matter as we experience them, discreteness and solidity, are greatly overemphasized concepts derived from our perceptual limitations. What we call matter is simply particular patterns and frequencies of energy. We think of matter as being solid, but science long ago realized that this wasn't true. Science knows that relative to the size of the atoms, there are vast distances between the atoms in clumps of matter. And even within the atom, there is mostly empty space. Of course, the space isn't really empty. It's full of energy and patterns of energy at much higher frequencies and finer scales. Subtle matter from the higher planes, if you will. All the things or objects in the plane of reality that we exist in, rocks, trees, people, etc., are all just different complex patterns of energy with certain frequencies. Since we know that we perceive a very narrow band of frequencies, why couldn't there be energetic patterns of similar complexity and type as the ones that we call a rock, a tree, or a person, but composed of frequencies much higher than our own and outside of our perceptual range? And wouldn't these patterns be analogous to the objects and entities that we have here in our frequency band? In other words, effectively an entire parallel reality with its own worlds and beings, etc. The ancients used the term planes for these frequency bands and the parallel realities that they contain. The contemporary term that is widely used is dimensions. Others have used the term densities, but what it all boils down to is frequency bands. Space is not empty. It's chock full of patterns of energy at many different frequencies that all occupy the same space. The energetic patterns all interpenetrate each other. They overlay each other. They are superimposed on each other. This is possible because higher frequency patterns are of smaller or finer scale and can be thought of as riding on top of or within the lower frequency, larger scale patterns. The frequency bands are far enough away from each other that there is limited interference, and hence they function essentially as separate realms of existence. Another way to say this is that space is partitioned into separate realms of existence by the virtue of the fact that sentient entities only perceive things or energy patterns composed of the frequencies within the same band that they're composed of. We only see what our frequency of consciousness allows us to see. Hence, frequency bands function as parallel realities. The biggest determinant of which plane of reality you inhabit is the frequency of your consciousness. That's because consciousness is energy. Consciousness isn't produced by the brain, as most scientists believe. The universal field of energy is conscious, or there's a consciousness that presides non-locally over the universal field of energy. And your brain is simply a receiver of that consciousness, not the producer of that consciousness. So how many planes of reality are there? And which one do we exist in? Well, the various ancient schools of thought each counted the planes a bit differently. Buddhism says there's 31 planes of existence separated into 3 realms. Others say there are 7 planes, each with 7 subplanes, for a total of 49 planes. And still others say that there are 33 planes. The one thing they all agree on is the numbering system. They all assign the number 1 to the lowest plane and then count up from there. This numbering system makes sense because each plane is a higher frequency band. In this system, the lowest 7 or so planes are considered physical or material, and the planes above this, and there are many, can be considered ethereal or immaterial planes. But there isn't a definite boundary. It's a gradual transition. Each plane of reality becomes less and less physical or material or concrete, and more ethereal, energetic, fluid. So can we visit these other realities or planes of reality in some way? Yes, we can. There's a small group of individuals in the world today that have mastered the ability to travel the planes of existence by tapping into their higher consciousness. Guy Needler is one of them, and he has explored many of the planes of reality and communicated with many interesting beings that exist there. I highly recommend Guy Needler's book, The History of God, in which he shares his journeys and what he has learned about the origin and physics of our universe. So, what plane of reality are we in? Well, until recently, we've existed in the third density, or the third dimension, or the third plane of reality, which, according to Guy Needler, is very near the bottom of all the frequency bands. It is a very dense material plane with a level of consciousness characterized by a loss of connection with our higher selves, limited awareness, egocentric thinking, and fear. As of approximately 2012, the base frequency of Earth and its inhabitants increased, and we've transitioned into the fourth density, a higher plane of reality, a higher frequency band of reality. The base frequency level of the planet and a significant number of its inhabitants is gradually increasing through the fourth density, and eventually, at some point in the future, will transition into the fifth density. Fifth density consciousness is characterized by much increased awareness, cooperative thinking, and unconditional love. We are ascending through the frequency bands into higher planes of reality, and we are evolving into higher levels of consciousness. As we ascend through the densities, our world will change for the better, because the outer world is a reflection of our level or state of consciousness. We co-create our reality via our collective level of our collective consciousness. The interesting thing is that there are numerous examples of planes of reality in our science fiction books and movies. Many of the concepts presented in science fiction are actually inspired by our inner knowing and connection to our higher selves, to our soul, to our oversoul, and beyond. Oftentimes, these concepts are reasonable approximations of how the greater reality works. A few recent science fiction movies that illustrate the concept of planes of reality are The Guardians of the Galaxy. In that movie, the main character, Star-Lord, walks through deserted ruins on an abandoned planet, and he uses a handheld scanner, which I'm going to call an interdimensional scanner, that allows him to illuminate and make perceivable another plane of existence, a parallel plane of existence where that planet had a vibrant city with many sentient beings bustling around the city. If you've got the movie, check out this scene at about 4 minutes and 50 seconds from the beginning of the movie. Another recent science fiction movie that illustrated parallel realities, parallel planes of realities, was the recent movie called Tomorrowland. In Tomorrowland, the main character acquires a device in the form of a curious lapel pin that, when pressed, switches her into a parallel plane of Earth reality. If you've got the movie, check that out. It's pretty neat. The neat thing about all these parallel planes of reality is they essentially exist in the same space, yet they're not visible to us. Beings that exist in the higher planes of reality could be right next to you and you wouldn't know it. Their bodies are super high frequency energy patterns and are not solid at all, at least to us. They can pass right through matter in the material plane that we exist in. Hence, some of the reports of ET encounters where they can pass through walls. Also, the idea that ghosts can pass through walls. This is a reflection of what I'm talking about. Beings inhabiting these parallel planes of material realities typically have no perception of the other planes. Beings inhabiting the more ethereal or energetic planes can typically perceive the lower planes of reality if they choose, if they have an intention and focus their awareness. One example of this is beings from the angelic realms, which are very high frequency planes of existence. Planes of existence very close to, let's say, the God frequency. These ethereal beings can communicate with us through our thoughts and feelings, because thoughts and feelings are energy too, just like everything else. Many beings from the higher planes of reality surround, observe, and support us all the time, even though that we are not aware of it. And these beings are commonly referred to as spirit guides, and your higher self made arrangements or contracts or agreements with some of them to watch over each and every one of us during our incarnation on Earth. And here's the amazing thing. Realities aren't the only thing that are multidimensional. Your very beingness is multidimensional as well. Your consciousness has multiple levels, and each of those levels potentially can be experiencing different levels of reality. That's it, folks. If you enjoyed this article, you might enjoy my book, The Metaphysics of Existence. I've packaged everything that I've written about spiritual metaphysics to date into one convenient package, and it's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. I've included a link to learn more about the book in the notes sections below this video. Enjoy!